What's up, everybody? Welcome to another vlog of mine. This is actually the first vlog where I won't be showing my face because I wanted to try out, just doing an audio file and then uploading it to YouTube. So that's why I'm here. So I noticed that over the past few months, I've been doing wrestling related content, which I think is going to be like a staple on my channel. But I'm now realizing that I haven't done predictions to pay-per-views. I just do the reviews. So it's time to change that. And what better way to start doing, you know, wrestling pay-per-view predictions than, WWE's Money in the Bank, which is tomorrow. I'm just so excited that fans are back in the arena. And I will also be going to a wrestling event in September right here in Raleigh where I live. So I'm really excited about that. And from watching SmackDown, which is like the go home show to Money in the Bank, I can tell that the fans were hooked and they were really into it. And now it makes me a little more invested in this pay per view, knowing that, it's going to be a crowd. It's going to be in Fort Worth, Texas. So that's a big deal. And I'm just really excited to see what each of these matches has in store. So I'm just going to go down the card and just kind of, give my predictions of what will happen. It's also important to note that I haven't been really watching the weekly shows consistently, and I think a lot of it had to do with it being in the Thunderdome. And I don't know, for whatever reason, when I try to watch it without like audience, and it's just like a virtual, screen of like the fans, it kind of made me cringe a bit. I would try to catch clips and whatnot. So some of these matches, I may not have too much knowledge of like the storyline, but I think I can kind of get away with it since it's Money in the Bank and people from both brands are going to be colliding, you know, in those matches, especially in terms of the actual Money in the Bank ladder match. So starting with the pre-show, we have Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio defending the SmackDown Tag Team titles against the Usos, Jimmy and Jay. This is on the pre-show, and I have a little bit of an issue like that with this because this should be on the main show, especially given the big reaction that Ray and Dominic and Edge got against Roman and the Usos, well, the Bloodline on SmackDown. I figured this would be on the main card, but we can take what we can get. Given the victory of the Usos and Roman versus Edge and Ray and Dominic on SmackDown, giving them kind of like an advantage over the team. I really honestly think that the Usos are going to become 7-time tag team champions. And to be honest, I kind of want them to become 7-time tag team champions, mainly because that reign has been long overdue. And it also adds the legitimacy to the Bloodline faction. And it brings them more power. And also, it adds that element of Roman Reigns being the tribal chief, the head of the table, and he's looking to elevate his brothers when you really look at the segments, look at the storyline, he's obviously manipulating them just so he can like continue to have the advantage and continue to hold the universal title as long as possible. However, if the Usos were to win the SmackDown tag team titles, which I really hope they do, I'm really pushing for them to win, then it can really, increase that legitimacy for Roman as the tribal chief and like saying, okay, I'm helping elevate you and bringing you back to prominence as a tag team, and we can hold the main titles together and we can run roughshod over SmackDown. So I think for this match, I'm going for the Usos. So that's my first pick. And then we move on to the main card. This is just going down the list on the card right now. Obviously, the order is subject to change. So we have the first Money in the Bank ladder match for a future World Championship match contract, in which the participants are Ricochet, John Morrison, Riddle, Drew McIntyre, Big E, Kevin Owens, Shinsuke Nakamura, also known as King Nakamura, and Seth Rollins. Now this one is a little bit tricky because I have a couple people that I feel they're contenders for winning. Those including Riddle, Drew McIntyre, Big E, and even Seth Rollins. Now, the one person that I really feel like does not need this win is Drew McIntyre, which kind of sucks because, during the pandemic era, he was one of the forerunners of, that era as the WWE champion. And then he had a long rivalry with Bobby Lashley. But on the flip side of that, I think it's time for like Drew to get a little bit of a break and kind of take a step back for a bit. And then in regards to Riddle, I'm kind of 50-50 on Riddle. I enjoyed his work in NXT. He was very popular and he had some great and memorable matches down there. But for whatever reason on the main roster, I'm finding it kind of hard to take him seriously, if that makes sense. However, I do see the appeal, like with this character and his ability to, attract, attract the audience, and he can be thoroughly entertaining. Well, sometimes he can be a bit cringy, but for the most part, he can be very entertaining. So I also see him as a one to go with the win. Now, in terms of Seth Rollins, I kind of have a bit of a theory, especially during the episode of SmackDown. He and Edge, they had a little bit of a confrontation. Say that Edge wins the Universal title from Roman, and then Seth, wins the Money in the Bank contract. This can be a way for Seth to automatically go after Edge, because there have been, a couple talks of Rollins and Edge kind of revisiting their little scrap that they had 7 years ago, and then kind of like really having a full on feud. But then there's another part of me that's just like, I'm not quite ready for Roman to lose the title just yet. Mainly because his heel run has been predominantly in the Thunderdome. And I really want to see, more of like the crowd interactions that they will have with Roman as he's a heel. And he got a good amount of heat on SmackDown, so evidently, it's working. But for my overall pick for this Money in the Bank ladder match, it's kind of hard, but I actually may say Seth, and maybe a close second being Big E, because in regards to Big E, he's breaking out on his own from the New Day. The New Day, probably one of the most popular tag teams in WWE over the past decade. Broke up with them, due to the WWE draft last year. So now he's like on his own as a singles competitor. He still kind of retains some of like the New Day persona, in his solo work, but still he's a singles competitor now. And for whatever reason, I feel that he's getting a little bit of a push. So I wouldn't be surprised if Big E were to pick up the win either. But my number one overall pick is Seth. So I'll stick to that. I'll take the gamble on Seth. And then we have the women's Money in the Bank ladder match for a future women's championship contract. A future women's championship match, excuse me. And in this match, we have Asuka, Naomi, Alexa Bliss, Nikki Cross, Liv Morgan, Selena Vega, Natalya, and Tamina. Now, with this match, just like the other Money in the Bank match, there's a couple of people that I can potentially see holding the contract. However, there are some people in this match who I honestly don't think should be in the match. For instance, Natalya and Tamina. They're tag team champions. Why are they in the match? And it's going to be pretty obvious that they may very well interact against each other as they're gunning for that one briefcase. So that was kind of like, I'm a little iffy on. Don't quite understand why. And then in terms of Asuka, same thing with like Drew McIntyre. She was women's champion for the great part of the pandemic era, Thunderdome era, whatever you want to call it. And she was featured very prominently, heavily in some big feuds, during that time period. So I don't think that she would necessarily be affected or hindered if she did not win. And let's be reminded that when she won the Money in the Bank contract, She won the Raw Women's title because Becky Lynch, announced her pregnancy. So you also have that aspect. And Asuka has pretty much won every title, every stipulation, Money in the Bank, Royal Rumble, everything that you think of, Asuka has done. So I don't really think like this will really affect Asuka as much as like her other opponents. Now, for an overall pick, it's really hard because some of my picks are Naomi, Alexa Bliss, Liv Morgan. I would say Asuka, but like I said previously, she doesn't really need to win the Money in the Bank contract. So I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't win. But definitely Naomi, Alexa, and Liv. Kind of stuck between those three. But if I had to go out on a whim in terms of who really needs this win the most to, carry on their legitimacy as a superstar, I would beg to say Naomi. But the thing is, with Liv, she has never won a title. And in my honest opinion, I really feel like she should have won the women's tag team titles at least once with the Riot Squad, but that's like a whole different story. So with Liv, I can see that potential of her holding the Money in the Bank contract as well. Alexa, a little bit, but she still has her own, dark, twisted persona going on. It made sense when she was with the Fiend, but now it's just kind of like her doing like her own thing, and I'm kind of like, so when is she gonna like kind of snap out of this now? Because to be honest, it's getting a little bit stale. So I'm really, really like, I can just having a hard time choosing one. So I guess I can eliminate Alexa after saying that. So either Naomi or Liv. I'll leave it at that. And then next on the card, you have Bobby Lashley versus Kofi Kingston for the WWE Championship. Oh my goodness, where do I even begin with this? Well, I think it's great that Bobby now finally has a new opponent outside of Drew McIntyre. That's a great thing. In all honesty, I want Bobby to retain because I need to see a little more intensity from Bobby, if you will. And no offense to Kofi. I love Kofi. I enjoyed his work for many years. I just feel that Bobby needs to hold the title a little bit longer. Now, I'm not necessarily saying he needs to have it as long as Roman Reigns because Roman is pushing on a year as the Universal Champion. However, I do feel like Bobby needs a little more linked to his title to prove his dominancy as a champion. So with that match, I'm going to go with Bobby, 100%. And then you have Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte Flair for the Raw Women's Championship, wherein it's kind of like that repetitive booking again, right? It's time for Rhea to get a new opponent. I love Charlotte. Charlotte's great at what she does, but there's some other women on the roster who can easily jump in and, can be seen as a legitimate contender for the title. So hopefully after this match, I really hope it's the final one between these two because I want Rhea to retain because the earlier parts of her championship reign have not been the best. And it's not entirely her fault. And, it's a little bit shaky. She's not really entirely settled into like that main roster, vibe. But I still want her to retain because I can see some potential in her. And I just feel like it's a little time for Charlotte to kind of step back from the title picture a bit and let other women, get a shot. So with this match, I'm going to go for Rhea. And then we have Holy Holy Roman Reigns versus Edge for the WWE Universal Championship. I'm still a little salty about this because this should have happened at WrestleMania. I feel like that should have been a perfect time. Like I love Daniel Bryan, but Daniel Bryan really shouldn't have really been in that match. I'm still having a hard time even today understanding what was the point of him being, entered into that rivalry between Roman and Edge. But, now that we finally have it, is in front of an audience, I have very high expectations for this match. So I mentioned earlier about, you know, Seth Rollins being a top contender to win Money in the Bank and obviously getting the contract. So it's kind of like a little fantasy booking here. Say Rollins wins the Money in the Bank contract, and then later in the night, wins the Universal Championship, and then Rollins comes out of nowhere and like cashes in and wins the title. And kind of like do like a replay of what he did at the main event of WrestleMania with Roman versus Brock Lesnar, right? So there's some possibilities that can happen, and obviously, with the bloodline, I honestly feel that either Jay or Jimmy or both of them are going to be at ringside, and if for whatever reason Dominic and Ray, they're also going to get involved. So, a couple of things can really happen here, and then of course Roman can retain on his own, and not have anybody in ringside, and he can just go out, win by himself, and kind of like a way for people to acknowledge him as the tribal chief, so to speak. But for whatever reason, it's really hard for me to pick because it can honestly go either way. But I'm gonna go on a whim and say Roman because I honestly can see him holding the title until around SummerSlam, which, in that case, by that time he'd hold the title for, a full year. So I'll go with Roman. And obviously, I believe that's going to be the main event. But we also have here on the card AJ Styles and Almost versus the Viking Raiders for the WWE Raw Tag Team titles. I'm going to be honest with you. I really don't have any investment into this match whatsoever, which is kind of sad because as a person who grew up on great tag teams, the tag team division in WWE is god awful. I'm sorry. I mean, you have some good teams, but it's not as solid as it used to be. Say Attitude Era or Ruthless Aggression Era. It it just gotten worse and it's declined heavily over the years. And there's really a lot of teams that are thrown together, and not with the Viking Raiders because they were a war machine in Ring of Honor. So I followed them for a while. They're a legit team. They've held various tag team titles around the world, so not them. But AJ Styles and Almost, I mean, I can understand like Almost being his bodyguard and whatnot, but in the grand scheme of things, it makes no sense. So I honestly don't really want to make a prediction about this. I think something's gonna have to happen in order for it to surprise me. But as of now, I'm gonna go with AJ and Almost. Yeah, and just leave it at that. So I pretty much hit all the bases. My predictions will not be as lengthy as my other wrestling related content, which is on average like an hour to an hour and a half long. These are just going to be like some quick predictions to get my thoughts out. It's going to be in audio format, so you probably won't even see my face for most of the videos, which there's nothing wrong with my face. I just want to try this out just to see how it works. And it can upload faster to my channel, so that's always a plus. Nonetheless, I'm looking forward to watching Money in the Bank tomorrow, and I will definitely have a review, either solo or with my frequent collaborator, 𝘗𝘳𝘦𝘥𝘪𝘰 Jr., and hopefully Dexter can join us as well. So stay tuned, and I hope you guys enjoyed this quick predictions vlog. Stay wavy.